I'm going to talk about sins and virtues of free-to-play business model. So the topic of my talk today is sustainable free-to-play. So this is something that we have defined last year, a new way to talk about how games could last for years, how they can be operated for 3, 4, 5 years, stay alive, cross platforms from social to mobile and further to desktop and other platforms. And I'm going to talk about the age of abandon. This is a term that we use for games that have been shut down without a reason by big publishers or huge developers that still have hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of monthly active users. And they prefer to just shut down these games, betray players, and keep them in the dark. So a little bit about Game Insight. We're 6 years old, 10 studios, 700 people, over 15 products in operation, and actually over 300 something million players out there are playing our games. Okay, that's handy. Okay, so for this talk I was inspired by a really old article from PC Mag. I think it was something like 92. That had 7 deadly sins of computing back then. Like you have to do that, and it was very inspiring for me to apply those 7 deadly sins to free-to-play business model, to the way we run games, to the way we treat players, and the way and if we will keep doing that, we will have a lot of bad things in the future about perception of this business model. So I thought that I'm going to talk about a couple of virtues, how we could serve our players better, how we could preserve the trust of players and increase the brand value for those who play our games, so they will trust us. So I will start, well, I wanted to structure this talk as something like, here's a BuzzFeed list of, if you will do these 6 things, your players will stick, but I'll just do a traditional presentation since it's only a 20 minutes talk. So the first part, like for any free-to-play game, it has to be updated often. It's not a paid game. You release that and maybe you do a DLC update or something like that every quarter or so to still retain the interest. Free-to-play and games as a service are all about treating your players, treating your loyal players with daily events, with weekly content, with monthly major features. You have to communicate that to them, and that's getting really difficult. That's one thing from tips and tricks that I'm going to talk about today that we think is the most important one. It's really hard to communicate that to players. It used to be much easier 5 years ago when players will just press like on each and every game they play on Facebook. Nowadays, it's almost impossible to communicate it to them. The apps auto-update on Apple App Store, on Google Play. Players have no idea what's inside there. And most developers even don't know how to communicate that. Imagine that you're playing a game and there is a new update. When was the last time you've actually read the what's new? You've got 75 updates happening every month on your phone. You can't keep track of that. So one big thing that we keep talking about is there are so many channels and each of them has to be properly used, and that's really difficult. You have to send push messages about updates. Once players come to the game, they have to see a news hub which explains all the new content. And they just keep skipping that. You have to show all the new quests, you have to show new here. So players will really know that you're delighting them, that new content is being made available. So all those things are super sensational. Like they need to wow players. So this is one of the examples of news hubs for one of our games called Cloud Raiders that works across 7 platforms. It's a cross-platform strategy game, and every day players log into the game. They see a new piece of content. They see some news. They could click and comment on that on Facebook. They could like and share that. But what they also could do, they could go to the back catalog. Because if players have skipped 3, 4, or 5 days of the gameplay, they need to figure out what has actually happened during those days, what are the events they have missed, and what is new out there. Not only that, it's getting more and more difficult to retain players because they don't know how often you update your games, and that thing gives you this extra little touch of trust out there. We went one step further. We put commitment to players on our sites, on our Facebook groups, and inside the game, which shows the roadmap of the game. All the features that we have delivered in 2 years of development time since the game has launched, and up to the current moment of time. So any player that starts playing now will see they will get heroes, they will get new arenas, they will get that and that. And that gives them extra assurance to actually start playing now, and not only playing, but paying as well. So the second success point behind Game Insight is that in 6 years, we have almost, I would say almost with little asterisks, haven't shut down a single game. We have released almost 50 games now. 15 of them are in active operation, being updated at least every month, and a lot of them on a daily basis and weekly basis. All other games, if you will install them, if you still have them on a phone, are fully operational. That's something that very few companies do. And if you remember the stories behind the shutdown of games by companies such as Playdom acquired by Disney, Playfish acquired by EA, and Zynga, they have shut down tens and tens of games, betraying millions of monthly active users and players. And every time these companies have tried to launch a new game, what they get on Facebook, what they get across community and press, is this huge backlash. You try to announce a new game and you get 10,000 negative comments. Well, you have shut down our previous game. We trusted your brand. Now you have betrayed us, thousands of paying players, tens of thousands of active players, and sometimes millions of active players. Why would we trust your new game again? What's the reason behind that? So with so many titles that we have released, which is similar on the scale of those companies, for us it was really important to do a couple of things. How could we sunset those titles? How could we let players play these games until the end of life cycle, until they actually lose the phone or do something like that? And for that, you need to have temperance. So one thing that we have invented is called offline play. Since 5 years ago, we have released our first mobile game. All those games had a feature to play offline. So if servers go down, if servers get shut down, if you have no internet and you're on a plane, you still could play the game. That's from my previous subject, that you have great ways to keep the game still being available in the App Store, and they can still be played with the default content that you put in there. So the other big part behind the offline play is emerging markets. 5 years ago, we had those games, and then suddenly Southeast Asia explodes, and they only have tiny data plans, tiny data loans, and they go offline to play. And the few games they could play are our games. So when low-end phones launched there, we have seen millions of downloads of our games from that region because they support low-end phones and offline play. So that's really important. And one of the best examples of actually sunsetting the game is My Country Seasons, which is like 5 years old game. So instead of removing it from the store, we just enabled all the content that has ever been created to players and let them choose to play that content ever. Just tens of thousands of people still play the game compared to millions of players that play our other games. But none of the players actually went and said, you have killed our save games, you have killed the game servers, we couldn't play that anymore. And that's a huge thing. And the second screenshot is a game Airport City, and most of our games support that. You could play it on a train, you could play it on a phone, and that's a big deal for a free-to-play game that rely on servers. So the fourth virtue I want to talk about is the diligence. You need to listen to your players, you need to listen to your team, and you need to act. Nowadays, you get the feedback from tens of different channels. Anything from App Store reviews, customer support, Facebook comments, direct messages through Facebook, so many different things out there. And you need to feel that vibe. And every team member in the team, not only the customer support and service team, needs to feel those consequences. So, like nowadays, there are tools like Slack, and at Game Insight, we have integrated over 20 channels of communication that send daily updates and summaries of those things. And all of them are fully transparent, including stats for all the team members out there, so they could track the progress of the game. They could see that the patches being applied to the game, the new features that are being rolled out, don't actually break things and improve things. The same applies to sentiment of player feedback. And if something bad happens, they're the first to know because that data is being delivered to them to real time. And they don't have to send an email to customer support team. They don't have to wait 48 hours for the ticket to process to figure out that something is wrong with the game servers. So that's a virtue that you could do to your players. You need to act in real time and figure out the problems before they reach the large scale out there. That's a weird one. I actually didn't expect that 5 years ago that we'll be making sequels of our games, that we'll be making spin-offs of our games. But once you get a big brand, and if you will look at Angry Birds, at Candy Crush Saga, at all those great companies like Supercell, they keep doing that. Once you have a really great brand, you start doing that. So like we have the Tribes franchise, one of our most massive franchises that we have. It actually even predates Game Insight. It's like 7 or 8 years old IP back from Casual Games days, and it was created during the early days of Casual Connect. Nowadays, it's a free-to-play mobile, social, cross-platform game, and we're releasing the third game. It's in beta on Facebook right now called Tribes at War. So if you have a brand, you have a choice to make. Do you create a new game that might not be as exciting, as vibrant, as popular? Or do you keep making sequels and delighting your existing player base? And we have a lot of players who play both Tribes and Castles because these are actually two different games with completely different storylines, updated monthly with so much content that players could barely handle both games playing them at the same time during the month's time frame. We release a lot of content for those players. And both Tribes franchise is there for, like, the regional Tribes is in operation for almost 40 years now. So if you delight your players on a weekly basis, if you keep transitioning your games from platform to platform, the original Tribes, Jack of all Tribes, was released as a casual game. It transitioned to social, being released on Facebook and on other networks. Then mobile, the Tribes on mobile is our biggest franchise. And then nowadays it's available for Windows Store and coming to other platforms as well. So think about that. Do you need to create a new franchise if you could make a new game in a franchise people really like? And I actually had a talk, 1 hour talk last year at Casual Connect, talking about cross-platform and how Game Insight approaches that. 15 of our games are available across 6 platforms, and it's our policy to delight our platforms in all ways. You couldn't really grow the brand unless the game is available across all platforms. There are a few exceptions, great exceptions. They might have started as a Facebook game and then transitioned to mobile. Now they're big everywhere. But nowadays, if you want to get easy traction, get tens of thousands of players coming to your game, it's easier if you could build a cross-platform game, launch in all stores, and really, that's kind of an easy one. For us, the next step is going to regions out there and releasing more things and localizing them for Asia. We are releasing some games in Japan and Hong Kong now, so that's an expansion of the brands and franchises, and we have to really rework the games for those countries. So last year I was talking about so many platforms, but this year the latest trend that we see, if you are a mobile-only developer and your games are in C++, you could use tools like mscript and SMGS, WebSM to port your game from mobile to Facebook and expand the reach. So you can bring your mobile game in just a matter of weeks. If you're a good development team, if you use like Coco Studio X or something like that. So we started porting our mobile-only games to web about 18 months ago or something like that. Now we have 6 games, fully cross-platform, same login, same progress for all of them. That's kind of like the last 6 games that we have released. This is not Flash, so if you will try any of these games on Facebook, none of them are Flash, no plugins required. And well, we just got a huge new audience on Facebook from mobile-only games. And these are players who are trying them for the first time on the web and then expanding to mobile. So the few things that I went here is that free-to-play could be actually not evil. It could be sustainable. You could keep delivering fun to players for years to come and supporting those games after the end of life cycle. Because if you treat your players well, you will get your brand really trusted, and you will retain the loyalty going through the years, through all the platforms and generations. So next time you design a free-to-play game, keep some of those things in mind. Thank you.
Well, the obvious question, how can you never let a game die? How do you have the resources to keep 50 games alive? As you said, like, how do you manage that?
Why do you need resources to keep the game alive? You've got servers.
You said monthly updates. Each of these games gets a monthly update.
No, I said 15 of those games are updated on a monthly basis. So obviously 35 games, I explained there, outside of life cycle period. But those games, as I shown, they have so much content that if any new player downloads those games, they will still experience like a year of content. So that's still profit. And if you have a big scale of that, that still makes sense. So that was the point. But obviously, we focus only on 15 games. That's as much as you could focus in a company, I think, like ever. That's just too much.
Hi. So if you're continually adding content to these games over many, many years, do you have any tips on like maintaining a small install size?
Yeah, well, absolutely. The install size is a thing that changes, every year, or actually every 2 years. For Facebook, it was crucial to get the first download in 6-7 max so players could start playing and the thing stream. But now internet gets faster. Once we started with Android market, before it was Google Play, non-Wi-Fi limit was 20 max, but the phones had like 800 by 480 resolution. So nowadays it's, 99 max. And obviously the new technology, like the new compression algorithms for WebM, WebP, all those new formats let you squeeze more content into the smallest packages out there. But once we go beyond the life cycle of the product, we'll just pull everything into one big package and just leave it there. So if you see one of our games from 2012 or 2013, it might be even 200 max package because it was packaged many years ago but still has all the content. So, and nowadays it's a non-issue. It used to be a big issue back then. Nowadays we see some of our games which are like 500 max being downloaded at decent rates, so that's a non-issue.
Okay, thank you very much. You heard Anatoly Ropotov, the CEO of Game Insight. Thank you.
Thanks.